who have registered on Zoom to attend today. One late question has been received, and this has been passed to the relevant Cabinet member for a written response. For those in attendance, at the appropriate time, the meeting host will bring the questioner into the virtual meeting room to enable them to ask their question. Once a speaker has asked their question, the host will then return them to the virtual public gallery. Before I hand back to the chair to proceed to introductions, there are just a couple of housekeeping points to mention. To make the meeting run as smoothly as possible, can I ask that all participants in the virtual meeting room have your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. When you want to speak, please use the chat facility so that the chair is aware. Only unmute when the chair indicates that you can speak. If at any time members lose the ability to hear or be heard, please let myself, the chair, or Jay, the host, know as soon as possible. Finally, for the benefit of members of the public, you might see members looking away from their screen at times. This is because they need to look at additional screens or devices containing their agenda papers. I'll now hand back to the chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Craig. And before we start, could I just go around the screen as I see it for all Cabinet members to introduce themselves? I'll start. I'm Councillor Bob Johnson, Leader of the Council. Next on my screen as I see it is Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Mark Jones and I'm the Cabinet Member for Environment, Street Scene and Climate Change.
Julie.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Julie Greycoat, Member for Transport and Development.
Abby.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Councillor Abdisam Mohammed and I'm the Cabinet Member for Education and Skills.
Mazza.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mazza Iqbal, Cabinet Member for Business and Investment.
Jackie.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Jackie Drayton. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Families, and I have public health in my portfolio as well. Thank you, Chair.
Terry.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Terry Fox and I'm Cabinet Member for Finances, Resources and Governance and also Deputy Leader.
Thanks. George.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. I'm Councillor George Lindars-Hammond and I'm the Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care. Thank you.
Paul.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Paul Wood. I'm the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods and Community Safety.
And Mary.
Hello, I'm Councillor Mary Lee and I'm Cabinet Member for Culture, Parks and Leisure.
Thanks very much and thank you all for attending today. If we move on to item 2, which is apologies for absence. I haven't received any apologies. Have any been recorded with officers?
None received, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Item 3, exclusion of public and press. Items 13 and 15 to 19 on the agenda. There are a number of appendices which are not available to the public or press because they contain exempt information. If members wish to discuss the information in those appendices, we will then move them to the end of the agenda and I will ask members of the public and press to kindly leave for that part of the meeting and we will halt the webcast. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any members that wish to declare an interest in any items of business on the agenda? If so, could you let us know which item of business you are referring to and whether it is a pecuniary or personal interest and outline the reason for the declaration? Anybody? Councillor Greycoat.
Yes, Chair. Can I declare a personal interest, please, in item 10, the revenue budget, as I'm a member of Stocksbridge Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Item 5, minutes of previous meeting. Could I ask members to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of Cabinet held on 20th of January 2020?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That brings us on to item 6. We're swiftly moving along. Public questions and petitions. As mentioned in the meeting introduction, there are 7 questions from 4 members of the public. These are set out below in the appendix in order of receipt. 1 late question has been received, which Craig has already referred to, which has been passed to the Cabinet Member for written response. Craig, could I ask you to invite the first questioner in, please, or Jay?
Hello. Good afternoon. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Cabinet and officers. Thank you for this opportunity to ask these questions. I have 3 questions, 2 are a little bit long, but not excessively so, I think, and 1 very short indeed. The first one, number 1. On BBC Radio Sheffield on 15th of October 2019, Councillor Jones took part in a now notorious interview with Toby Foster on BBC Radio Sheffield. And I've put a reference there in case anybody wished to review that. A, will you now explain why, Councillor Jones, you stated, quote, "We," meaning SCC, "did not try to put anybody in prison," when this was patently untrue, and this was known at the time. And for the avoidance of any doubt for Cabinet members, I have placed an image of the committal notice, which was in court, seeking to imprison a number of citizens, including an elected councillor, who is still a member of Sheffield City Council. So that's the public record. Was informed. So the first question was, will you now explain, please, Mark? The second, was informed political authorisation sought from the leader of the council for this action, or did the head of legal and governance authorise the legal action via delegated authority without seeking informed political sign-off? This is fairly crucial in terms of governance and authorisation of a very serious act, which in fact the judge described as rather odd. In that interview, Mr. Foster suggested that you, Mark, go away and find out who made the decision that led to the Rustlings Road debacle. And by the way, the word debacle was yours. And call him back when you had found out. You agreed to do that. Have you agreed to it? Have you made that call back to Toby? And if so, are you able to share with us now what you told him? And D, since there's been no repeat appearance on BBC Radio Sheffield, it would appear that you have yet been unable to unearth the truth around this matter. Therefore, please would SCC initiate an independent inquiry into the whole SCC Amy PFI saga, as advocated in last week's Yorkshire Post article. This would be a positive step towards lancing this festering sore that debilitates our governance. And in your answer, Mark, would you please desist from referring to the street tree strategy, which is fantastic and welcome? You know I take that view. It's a great development, but it isn't what I'm asking. And the archive, which again is probably welcome, but is not the answer to the question. So that's question 1. Thank you for listening. Question 2. A 2019 appeal court hearing, known as the Canary case, found that the blunt tool of civil injunctions should not be used in place of civil proceedings. As a result of that judgment, it is now highly unlikely that SCC will be successful in securing the notorious and draconian persons unknown injunction, which of course apply to everybody in the world, which is utterly bizarre. And thus, the imposition of costs and suspended prison sentences which resulted from the injunction may now be considered illegitimate and most certainly morally unjust. Will the Council today and on record express its regret that this blunt tool was used to crush peaceful protest and arrange for some form of reparation for those who suffered in both financial and emotional terms? Next, the Labour Party can boast a fine tradition of supporting protest against injustice. And in the town hall lobby, there is a very fine plaque commemorating the Kinder mass trespass in the 1930s. Will the leader please take this opportunity to clarify the council's position on peaceful protest and set out the roadmap for a constructive truth, atonement and reparation process that we so clearly need? And finally, in this question, will the leader please comment on the fact that FOIR released emails show communications within the council which reveal planning to describe Councillor Alison Teal's acquittal on an alleged injunction breach as a, quote, technicality, contrary to what Justice Mayles clearly said in his judgment, and I was present to hear that judgment, and it is, of course, a matter of public record. Does the current leadership believe that seeking to deceive the public by misdescribing Justice Mayles' words is honest governance? And very short question, question 3. In 2019-20, the local government ombudsman reports that 89% of SCC-based complaints were upheld, compared to 67%, their own figure, in similar authorities. I'm just curious as to why Sheffield has such an appalling record in this respect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Mr. Johnson, and it's good to see you today. I hope you're keeping well. Your voice sounds a bit croaky today, so hope that's nothing serious. Yes, when I went on the radio station with Mr. Foster, he was certainly in frisky form, that's for sure, it's just part of his way, and I quite enjoy it actually myself, to be honest. With regards to the questions they got, there's many of them, so I'll attempt to work through them. In saying what I said to Toby with regards to question A, this is a repetition of a statement that had previously been made by the then leader of the council. So to a large extent, I was just basically reiterating what we'd already said on public record, and that remains the answer today.
It's not true. It's not true, Mark. It can't remain the answer when it is not truthful.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson, could you not interject, please, and go on mute while you're getting your responses to your questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, for part B of this question is this question has been addressed by the previous leader, and I will just refer you to those previous answers. With regards to question C, I have yet to return to the call to Mr. Foster, but I will today repeat what I have said at various sources within the media and somewhere else, that I wholeheartedly believe that we are all the products of our environment and our experiences, that our decisions are doubly so. Now, I'm not avoiding the question in any way, form there. And I maintain that the breakdown in communications and the subsequent environment that developed from that failure to hold a dialogue resulted in a series of decisions that were frankly wrong, and we wouldn't seek to defend them, and those were our responses to the Ombudsman when he brought the paper. We will endeavour to make sure this doesn't happen again. We can't say that I'll not make a misstep along the way, but that's where we are at with that one. With regards to question D, this is yeah, brace yourself, Mr. Johnson. This is a good question, because it clearly acknowledges the efforts we're putting into rebuilding trust with our citizens of Sheffield. But you are quite right that there is a difference between the past and what has been done and the future relationships we are endeavouring to build. I am optimistic about that future and believe that the previous issues have to some extent been addressed, and would hope that the vast majority of people in Sheffield are satisfied with how things are currently proceeding. I would like to say that from conversations I have had, that there are many people who have concerns about the things that happened before, and some have expressed reticence about addressing those questions at this time, and that's pretty much what I've taken on board from that. And 1.2, the second questions that we've got in here. Sorry, there's quite a few of them. Again, this is a repetition of the previous leader's question to an extent, that we indeed welcome all and any peaceful protest, and we are happy to repeat that. And with regards to the next part of the question, we would not look to deceive the public in any way, and I think that mostly covers my bits.
Yeah, I'll pick up question 1.3, if you don't mind, Mark, Mr. Johnson, regarding the complaints to LGO. And thanks for that question. I'd really like you to be able to provide numbers and the names of the other councils that you refer to in this question. If you could provide me them in writing, then I'll get you a suitable answer.
I just need to refer you to the website where that figure is given.
Yeah, and hopefully, if you can provide me with those details, I'll be able to respond to you.
Yeah,
fully.
it's just
in a manner that I'm sure you will be able to appreciate, rather than it being anecdotal.
It's not anecdotal. Just Google LGO website, and it gives you those two figures side by side.
Well, perhaps if you want to get in touch with them, they'll be able to provide you that metadata to be able to substantiate these allegations.
Well, no,
thanks for your question.
This is the LGO. It's a national organisation. Same old obfuscation, same old SCC.
Thank you. Could we invite in the next questioner, please, Craig? I believe it's Adam. Oh, there he is.
Good afternoon, councillors. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My question is following from the question asked at full council on beginning of month on communications. How are we going to make sure people with all disabilities have access to the relevant information so they can actually do the civic duty in the local election coming up?
Chair, if I can.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I'd refer your question on to Councillor Terry Fox.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Adam. First of all, I want to start with an apology. I think when you asked your question at the last council, I think the actions of some councillors was very disconcerting and very distracting for you. And I think Councillor Drayton highlighted that in some of her replies. So I do start with that, Adam, and thanks for coming back again.
Councillor Fox, thank you. My partner actually witnessed the haulings and she was absolutely disgusted with it. And she thought it was very uncivil on the fellow councillors. I thought, right, I'm going to put that on record.
Well, please accept our apologies as an administration as well. I'm with you all the way. In reply to your question, Adam, the returning officer is finalising now the plans to send out the postal vote applications with the polling cards, and that will obviously give some choices to either vote by post or in a COVID secure environment, and also and by proxy as well, Adam. So hopefully that by this being forced upon us by government, we're going to try and make it A, as safe as possible, and B, make it as disabled friendly as we possibly can as well, mate. But if you do hear or you have any suggestions, mate, how we can do that, then that would be well received as well, mate.
Thank you much, Councillor Box.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks, Adam, for your question, and thanks for coming along today. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Craig, if you'd like to return Adam to the lobby and bring in the next question, please.
Good afternoon, all. Hope you're well. Just before I start, I just want to say thank you to Councillor Fox for the response to last week's question. A good, positive and short response. So excellent. Thank you very much. As for today's question, the last couple of council meetings and the history of council tinkering almost monthly with the city's constitution suggests there is a bigger issue than poor application of the rules within. We are sliding into an ever greater democratic deficit, and not all of which is council's making. And the editing by an officer of public questions is another sign of disrespect, which I recognise is a two-way street for the public of the city. With a new leader and a new chief executive, perhaps now is the time for council to commit to a wholesale review of the constitution, root and branch. Will the leader and cabinet, irrespective of the potential outcome of the May elections, make that commitment now? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Slack. We should always look to make the council more accountable, open and responsive to people's needs. I think everyone would agree that the last 12 months either have been exceptional. And of course, the council has not been immune to any of these changes and has brought about change to public meetings that we wouldn't usually have done. I want the council to be responsive to public questions, and I was pleased last month that every public question that was submitted was given time for a proper answer. It should also be noted that full council is scheduled for 3.5 hours, and many other items on that agenda. For instance, last month we had updates from Greg Fell on the public health and pandemic. We also had his response and our response to that, and the setting of the housing revenue account. What I don't think would have been fair was to have been seen to on a first come first served basis for people that had submitted questions. And I welcome that the Lord Mayor decided with council officers should be able to read out those officers on behalf of the questioner. This ensured a more streamlined process and crucially allowed more time for an answer. I think most members of the public want to see public questions in full council being used for genuine questions. And the process last month saw some statements within the questions abridged, but all of the actual factual questions were asked and responded to accordingly. Sheffield is far from an outlier in taking this approach, and this is exactly how it is done in many other local authorities across the country. We should always look to make the council and councillors closer to the people it serves. And when the time is right, I will make a full review of the council's constitution. However, I don't think in the midst of a pandemic is the right time to be doing that. So thank you for your question, Nigel.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. The commitment
It looks as though he's lost his connection, Chair.
Sorry, I think he's left. It's now Isabel. Hi, Isabel.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. So I've got two questions. Question one is, members of the Cabinet, including the previous leader, have said that they're actively seeking to work with people who may have ideas and expertise from within and outside the council. I understand that no opposition motions have been allowed during the pandemic. In view of the previously expressed desire to work collaboratively with those outside the ruling Labour group, could you please confirm what proportion of motions that have been proposed by opposition party councillors in each of the past 10 years have been passed? I'm interested in any trends as to whether opposition motions are being considered more or less favourably by the ruling Labour group over that time. That's question one. Question two, it's another streets ahead question. In reply to many public questions over the past few years about the setting up and the management of the £2.2 billion Streets Ahead contract, Cabinet members and the leader have repeatedly referred to the document Review of Tree Investigations, Lessons Learned and Actions, saying, and I quote, that the report sets out how the council has learned lessons. I've read that review document and it does seem to be solely concerned with decisions around how street trees should be managed in future. Whilst welcome, this certainly doesn't improve transparency in how decisions were made. A, to include 17,500 trees as a contractual requirement. B, to seek an injunction against the citizens of Sheffield at great cost to the public purse. And C, to seek to imprison peaceful protesters for alleged breach of the injunction. So would the new leader agree with me that the best way to learn broader lessons about these decisions would be to establish a robust inquiry, completely independent from officers and elected members who may have been party to the setting up and subsequent management of the Streets Ahead contract? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms O'Leary. I'll refer your first question to Councillor Terry Fox.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Isabel, for the question. As regarding anybody who's kind of been at full council or seen full council would have known that, you know, through this awful pandemic, we had to start in September and in October, on the 7th of October, we resolved the notice of motions would not be taken through this pandemic, due to the fact that obviously we wanted to give the Director of Public Health and other issues the airing that we and the public wanted to hear. As regarding the following on from your questions about trends and over the last 10 years, I really can't give you the numbers because, as I say, anybody who's watched full council will know that in more notice of motions, etc., people vote in parts, part A, and that gets then into an amendment, that then gets put into a substantive, that then comes through. What I can say is that at the last full council, an amendment from the opposition party was put in towards the housing revenue account and then was passed across the piece. And regarding the notice of motions, we've already had a discussion with cross-party discussing about the implementing, put my teeth back in, implementing them back onto the council agendas. So thanks for your question, Isabel. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Terry. Could I refer your next question to Councillor Jones, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Ms O'Leary. I hope you're keeping well. Your question here was broached previously by Mr Johnson as well. So I'd like to refer you to my previous answer. At this moment in time, I'm not sure this would be an appropriate way forward. And thank you for the question, Isabel. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, is that all of your questions answered? Thank you. Moving on to item 7, could I please ask our Director of Public Health, Greg Fell, to present his COVID-19 update, please?
Thanks, Chair. Let me just find my slides. Sure, there's only a few slides, and I shall share them. Okay, can you see those? Someone say yeah? Yeah, thank you. Right. Okay, so fairly short. So focus on epidemiology, vaccination, which is remains a thing at the moment. Short-term forward look and then long-term, a bit of crystal ball gazing as to what may happen on the 8th of March and then beyond. And a very brief note on the basic strategy. To cut to the chase, the basic strategy remains the basic strategy. So epidemiology first. Good news, but with caution. The slide shows the rate of decline. This is the bit of interest, which is the most recent weeks. The lockdown is having the effect that was expected to have. The 7-day rate of infection has been falling fairly steadily since mid to end December, probably closer to the end of December. It's been falling steadily since then. A slight blip up there. Reasons for which are a significant outbreak, but the overall trend is downwards. It's actually difficult to know where that will settle. Currently, the 7-day rate of infection is in the order of that data is a little bit out of date. So currently, it's in the order of about 150 per 100,000. It's trending towards 100 per 100,000. It's very unlikely we'll get to the levels that we saw last summer. The impact of the new variant, the Kent variant, we'll see to that. But I'm expecting the rate will be a good way below 100 per 100,000 in the not too distant future. So there's been a steady but fairly significant rate in the the age-specific rate for the over 60s. This is the hatch here is what we think is one of the government's key metrics of a 7-day rate of infection in the over 60s of over 150,000, and as the chart shows, we're well below that now. Similarly, we're declining fairly steadily for the 7-day rate across the whole population. So all of that is fairly good news. The headlines R is below 1, almost certainly. We don't measure it at city level, but the most recent estimate we've seen for the region is that R was below 1, somewhere between 0.8 and 1. It could be 1, but it's almost certainly 1 or below. Only just, and that's important. 7% of all people who have symptoms who then get a test positive. And remember, only a month ago, that was about 15%. And again, that is heading in the right direction. I prefer it was much, much lower. Last summer, it was about 1 or 2%. Cases are spread pretty evenly across Sheffield. There's not that much sign of clustering in the east that we have seen before. That may come, but fairly evenly spread. And household transmission remains the main route of most transmission events are in households, within and between households. Age rates are coming down in all age groups, but still higher than comfort. Most of the transmission is in working age population. That's the group that is out and about more. They're at work, clearly. They're out and about more, and the opportunities for transmission are a little bit higher. Hospital activity would definitely appear to be over its peak. A couple of weeks ago, 20% of hospital beds had a patient with COVID-19 in. It's less than that now. I think it's about 17-18%, and coming down. So definitely over the peak, but very, very high level, and that will decline really slowly. So I think the health and social care system, we talk about the hospital, but I'm talking here the whole of the health and social care system, will be dealing with the follow-on consequences of the wave we've just seen, probably for some time to come. Variants, the B117 or the Kent variant is the dominant strain. Settled for Sheffield, about 75% of all cases are B117. It is definitively more transmissible. That will have an upward impact on the 7-day infection rate. Difficult to know where that will settle. Some evidence that it's more serious in terms of the individuals infected. Not robust data, but certainly enough to give us pause for thought. The control measures, as I've said before, are exactly the same. The issue is lapses and the need to vigilance. There are two other significant variants of concern. One is the South Africa variant, one is the Manaus variant, which is a Brazil variant, neither of which are in Sheffield that we know of at the moment. That's probably a matter of if, when, not if. And both of those are of significant concern. Neither are thought to be particularly more dangerous to individuals, but the point is that antibodies from either the vaccination or from prior infection with a previous virus might not protect us quite as well. So that's where they're both of concern. So points of focus, I've talked about epidemiology. Vaccination is clearly the thing of the moment. That's excellent news with some caveats. So we'll start with the good news. Numbers, well north of 150,000 people have been vaccinated in Sheffield now. Huge effort on all fronts. Our organisation is doing a lot of support logistically. Clearly, the NHS is also doing a lot of support logistically, and the clinical act of sticking needles in shoulders. It's been a giant citywide effort on all fronts. The vaccination rates in the cohorts that we have offered to are pretty high. Vaccination coverage in care homes is high. Vaccination coverage in the very elderly, the over 85s, is high. Ditto the 75 to 80s. Some more work to do for us and the sector to ensure that we get vaccination coverage in care home staff higher than it is at the moment. And some mopping up to do, because we probably need to get higher coverage in our social care workforce. But don't let that shouldn't take away from the effort that has been put in, which has been spectacular. Now moving into cohorts 5, which is the 65 to 70-year-olds, who are being invited by and large to Sheffield Arena, and cohort 6, which is essentially those adults who would ordinarily get a flu jab or be eligible for a flu jab, 16 to 64-year-olds with underlying medical conditions, plus carers. The news on the delivery is excellent. We are sticking with the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisations criteria. So there are lots of people saying, I should be vaccinated. And we are making some really difficult prioritisation decisions. The reason is that if we say yes to group X, it means that someone who is probably higher risk of serious consequences would have their vaccination delayed, and that's not ethically or clinically justifiable. Only other thing to say on vaccination is that yesterday, another approximately 10,000 Sheffield residents were added to the shielded list. That's the result of a national policy. We have a more sophisticated understanding of risk, and we want that the group of 10,000 younger people who are now added to the shielding list, and government will be writing to them, and we will also write to them in the next couple of days to a week. We want that group to be vaccinated as well, but again, wait to be asked. Equality-wise and vaccination-wise, thus far surprising, few massive signs of unequal uptake. However, the data may not be as robust as we want, and I think it may not last. As we get to vaccinate younger people, I think we will start to see significant inequality in vaccination uptake. A lot of soft intelligence that vaccination rates in Asian groups are lower than white groups, and African, Black Caribbean groups are lower than Asian groups. No hard data on that, but a lot of soft intelligence. So we need to be vigilant and need to continue to do the work there. Further good news on vaccination, beginning now to see the signs that it is reducing the death rate and the hospitalisation rate in the very elderly, i.e. the vaccination is doing what it says on the tin. But the ask of all those people who have been vaccinated, it is not to pass out. We're asking people to still obey the rules, and we're asking that we really want to avoid unmitigated spread in an unvaccinated population, because that will still cause harm to people, no doubts about that. The unmitigated spread risks further mutations. Viruses will mutate. Forward look, easing of restrictions. I am a bit gloomier here. It's impossible to say what will happen in the run up to the 8th of March and after the 8th of March. Prime Minister's announcement will be next week. I suspect Prime Minister will call for schools to be fully reopened, probably from the 8th of March, but I don't know that. But soonish. Shielding has been extended to the 31st of March. As I say, 10,000 Sheffield residents have been added to the shielding list. I think there will be gradual reduction in restrictions over a long period of time. The narrative I've seen is a cautious but slow and irreversible reduction in restrictions. It might not be as irreversible as we want, because if the reduction in restrictions leads to a big spike in cases, I think government will reserve the right to impose restrictions again. But I think the lifting of restrictions will be really quite cautious and quite slow. I would expect summer to be rather like last summer. By then, however, we'll have a very well vaccinated population, and the vaccinated may be able to do different things. Next autumn and winter is a worry. I think there's been talk in the media of zero COVID. I think it's probably unachievable. I wish I were wrong there, but I think it's unachievable. So I think we'll be living with COVID for some time to come. There won't be a clean exit from the pandemic. My sense is that there are three criteria in my head. R will need to be very much below 1. Community transmission will need to be very, very much lower than it is now, and we'll need to have a well-vaccinated population. The third one of which will be actually quite close. That would be a couple of months away at very most. But I'm expecting to be in some form of managing the spread of the virus for probably the next calendar year. So I'm being a bit gloomy there, and of course I hope I'm wrong, but it's important to be honest. I think we will be living with this illness for quite some time. Last point would be the basic strategy. The basic strategy that this cabinet set almost a year ago is largely intact. The basic plan is largely intact. It's being reviewed at the moment. The basics do remain the basics. There is more as a city we are and will do on testing those who have symptoms, really pushing for, if you have symptoms, go and get a test. Contact tracing, and we have our own team now that supports the national team, and we will push harder on that. Push harder on the providing financial and other support to those who are asked to isolate. And adapting the city to living with COVID for the long time. But the basics do remain the basics, and the basic public health messages for the public will remain for some time to come. So I shall stop there, if that's okay, Chair.
And thank you, Greg. I do have 4 quick questions that people have indicated in, so if I bring them in order. Paul, if you'd like to ask your question first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, and congratulations on the good job you're doing with vaccinations. I've had 2 questions from local residents in my ward this week, which I didn't know the answer to. The very brief ones, really. The first one is there any priority being given to people who are pregnant on the vaccination programme? And the second question is, people who've had routine operations which are probably affecting the quality of their life greatly, when will the hospitals be seen to get back into being able to do the majority of that work? And is there a plan for dealing with the backlog of operations that have had to be cancelled over the recent months? Thanks, Greg.
So quickly, sadly, there's no special priority being afforded to those who are pregnant because they're not specially at risk. The focus of the vaccination programme is to focus on those who are at most risk of serious consequences. And happily, pregnant women aren't on that list. Therefore, they're not afforded priority vaccination-wise. And as I say, if one affords priority to a group of people at low risk, that means somebody at high risk gets lower priority, and that obviously carries potential consequences. So no is the short answer. On the hospital backlog, I think it may take some time. I couldn't give, there is a plan, I couldn't give you the details right here, right now of the plan, but the hospital in particular, but the health and social care system more broadly, does have a plan, but it will be some time before the hospital is fully caught up. I've got to call it honestly, significant amounts of elective care has been postponed and rescheduled to provide the capacity to the hospital to provide emergency care. I think that's right and appropriate, but it's a high pressure system, and there's not much slack in the system. So I think it will take some time to get back to steady state, I guess, and that will have consequences. There's no way around that. That will have consequences. I suspect that the hospital will be seeking to purchase additional capacity from the private sector for some of the backlog. But it's really a question that I ought to answer properly, and I'll do so in writing after having talked to the hospital.
Thanks for your question, Paul, and thanks for your response, Greg. Could I ask Councillor Iqbal to ask his question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Greg. Just want to echo what Councillor Wood said, doing an amazing job. Heard you on, I think it was Newsnight or BBC News, where they were saying Sheffield is, using the local teams, were able to trace about 80% of folks, which was an amazing figure. So, you know, well done to everybody involved. It demonstrates locally how when we join up the dots, work with our partners, we can get things moving. I had a GP, very similar to Councillor Wood. I had a GP contact me on Friday. He's in Handsworth. He also deals with some of the patients in Darnall. He's also, I think, part of the Clover group. And he echoed something similar that you've just said as part of your presentation regarding certain ethnic groups not being able to come in for the vaccination for whatever reason. Do we, two parts of this question. One, do we have, or do the GPs have the data on the people that have missed the vaccination? And the second question is, I know ourselves, the clinical commissioning group, are making resources available to improve comms, encourage people to come forward. Can a plea more than anything else, can this resource, rather than going to some of the citywide groups, you know, if I use my local group, Darnall Wellbeing, you know, if some of this resource, and I know we don't have community groups in every neighbourhood, but my plea is that, you know, this resource does go into the neighbourhoods and those community organisations that are able to reach people. So, you know, in a sense, are we able to get the numbers for the GPs? The second one is this increased number of people shielding. Yesterday, the government said, you know, these individuals are only entitled to statutory sick pay. We know with the self-isolation grant or £500 you get doesn't go far enough. On statutory sick pay, it's £95.85 a week. Month, it roughly works out at £415. With living costs and everything else, you know, it's very difficult for those individuals to stay at home, because economically, the burden of debt and so forth, the pressures that put on these individuals. I know we don't set the statutory sick pay rule, but it would be worth feeding this up. Are these individuals entitled to anything else, or is it just the basic £95.85 per week? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Iqbal. I didn't know I'd been on Newsnight recently, but I'm thinking they're recycling something from the past, maybe. To answer your questions, yes, GPs should know who has been invited and who hasn't turned up. I think it's fair to say that the GPs are focused on getting the turnout as high as they possibly can. So they're focused on the numerator of the equation. We collectively have to focus on the denominator, the who hasn't turned up that's been invited. The volunteering community sector has been pretty amazing, actually, thus far, in terms of its comms, its networks, its engagement. It gets to places that statutory organisations just can't get to. I know we all know that, and I know I've said that before, and we've all said that. It has done a great job thus far. The CCG have already invested in that space. I agree with you. I think that has to be in a hyper-local kind of way. My only caveat is that there are constituencies, for example, those with a disability, where the right route is to do that Sheffield-wide. So we need both local and Sheffield-wide in terms of getting high levels of coverage and engagement. That's work in progress. We keep very close watch on it and very actively involved in all sorts of different spaces. On statutory sick pay, yes, I think lots of people, me included, have said in a number of forums that it ought to be higher. There was a very helpful publication from New Economics Foundation a couple of weeks ago that just made the same point. Statutory sick pay is not high enough, but that is what the package that was announced yesterday, and it's in line with the package for those that are already on the shielded list and have been for a year or so. So I guess it's good in some ways that it's brought to a position of equity, but there's a valid debate to be had on whether or not that's sufficient to avoid an inducement to go out and earn money. That's more of a political point than that you may wish to take up than me, but it has been said in many places.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Mark, could I ask you to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. You said the vaccinations are working and that's driving down the rates. If you were to look at the rates for influenza uptake amongst those that have been vaccinated, but alongside COVID, because the flu jabs have also seen an increase. If you look at the vulnerable populations and the populations that have yet to receive immunisations, do you think there's a lesson to be learned there in how we proactively drive these immunisations to less vulnerable populations to try and keep influenza spikes down in future years? And also, you mentioned about the light at the end of the tunnel that has been able to have some remnants of summer and going out. Is there any thought that there's going to be an immunisation passport that you can wave to show that you're allowed to wander around, or what's that going to look like, do you think? Is there anything from government to help on that?
In reverse order, I've seen as much as been in the popular media on an immunisation passport. I know it's been considered by all political parties, and there are pros and cons for it, and it needs an awful lot of thought, actually. So I don't know whether or not it will become policy to require such things, but all governments across the world are talking about it. It has merit. It also has some problems, and I genuinely don't know which way government will eventually go on that one. On flu, what's flu? If you look at the hospitalisation data for flu this year, it's not there. It really isn't there. There is virtually nobody hospitalised for flu. We have, yes, absolutely pushed really hard as a city on getting flu jabs high this year. So we've got flu jab rates for the elderly up to, I think, in the order of 85%, which is unheard of. Really unheard of. As a result, and actually as a result of people are washing their hands a lot, wearing face coverings, keeping distance, though, that also has made a difference. There's vanishingly little flu this year. I think there are lots of lessons in terms of getting high vaccine coverage and the non-pharmaceutical interventions together have definitely made a difference. There's no two ways about the fact they've made a difference. I think we will be vaccinating people for COVID annually, I think. It depends how the immunity plays out, how the virus mutates, but flu viruses mutate, therefore we have an annual booster, and I suspect coronaviruses will mutate. So I think we will be in the position of vaccinating people annually, but we have to motor through the initial vaccination programme as quickly as possible, which the city is, to be fair.
Thanks, Greg. Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Greg. Julie, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg, for the presentation. I think it's been really uplifting hearing about all the good work that's going on across the city. So that is some really good news. My question relates to homeless people. When, how, and do we have an idea of how many we need to vaccinate? Thank you.
Yes, we do, but I don't. So I'd be loath to give you an answer in public now. But we do. There is a plan on how to do that. I think it will be. I think it will be about now, actually, because I think significant numbers of people will be put into cohort 6. But I'll give you a written answer on that one, because I'd be loath to give you a detailed answer now because I don't have that detail to hand. But it's certainly not been forgotten about.
Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for that response, Greg. And finally, Jackie, could I just bring you in to ask your question, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Greg. I just wanted to ask a question on, I know we had some difficulty, not just in Sheffield, but across the country, about the people who had mild symptoms going for a test. And then when getting tested and testing positive, the numbers of people who weren't isolating were still quite high. Do we know whether that's the same in Sheffield as the country, and do we know if it's gone down in Sheffield, and what are we doing about it? Have we improved, I suppose, and what are we doing to ensure we improve it? Having heard from the GPs who are on the GP consortium, they seem to be still saying we could vaccinate more. We have the capacity in Sheffield to vaccinate more. And the problem is we are not getting the vaccines that we need coming, or either they all come and they come when we're not expecting them, or they don't come at all and we're waiting for them. And I think there's something about what we can do about ensuring that we are the best. I think Yorkshire was the most successful in getting vaccines out, and in Yorkshire, Sheffield were. But if we could do better and also get to all the people that I know that all the councillors who've mentioned, get those out, the more we get our people in Sheffield, the citizens of Sheffield, vaccinated, as many as we can, the better it will be going forward. Albeit with your caveat, just to remind people, they have to have 2 vaccines, so they must remember to go back to the second one. And also, it doesn't mean they can go around hugging people. Having Greg told me that, I know I can't. I still can't hug my grandchildren. I haven't had 2 yet, but 1. But I just think, so what are we going to do about those things, really? And also, I did think that we were doing quite well on the Asian population. There was an uptick. We'd got quite a good, not that we still need to do, get that out, that they do need to, but it was the African Caribbean community in Sheffield that we needed to get out to. So anybody, any councillors and also the community can encourage those members of the African Caribbean community to actually go and get, when they're called, please do go and get a vaccine. Thanks, Greg.
So thanks, Councillor Drayton. In order, on isolation, we don't actually have good data on the proportion of people who do and don't fully isolate. We take our feed from research and surveys that are done nationally. There's no reason to think Sheffield is any different to the rest of the population. The intention to isolate is high for those that are asked to isolate. The actuality is somewhat lower, probably somewhere between 20 and 30%, and that's been fairly constant throughout. And the key issue is affordability. The issue is not about intention. It is the fact I have to earn some money to feed the kids, etc. So how can we support making the accessibility of the isolation grant as easy as possible? And we've made some significant improvements in that space recently, which I think will have fed through to the ease of access, ensuring that, for example, our community support teams and our voluntary and community sector partners are providing a range of non-financial support, because obviously the money does matter, but it's not all about the money. There are some non-financial issues as well. We haven't sent it out yet. We're about to send out fairly broadly an isolation support pack, which brings together all of the material that's available and all the support that's available in the city to all those who are asked to isolate. There's always more we can do there, though. Isolation is the key thing, and I think we all recognise it's a big ask on people to trap themselves at home for 10 days, particularly if they're well. So there's always more we can do to improve. On vaccination, supply is the key issue. There's plenty of capacity within the vaccinate halls, the clinicians that stick needles in arms, but supply is the key issue. There's some transient issues at the moment about the bumpiness of supply, which we're picking up directly with NHS England. As we get further into this, one of the concerns that we'll have to address is that there will still be significant activity vaccinating, giving people the first dose but then people will start to come back for the second dose. So that will put a lot more resource call on the one, the vaccinators, and two, the supply. So it's going quite well. There are some bumps in the road, and there are some issues that we just manage on a day-to-day operational basis. But I worry a little bit about the when we get into the big second dose campaign. It's not that nobody's thought about it. I think it will just double our problems and make for more operational problems. Lastly, on the data on uptake in the Black and Asian population doesn't tell us there's a massive problem, but I don't believe the data is not as robust as it needs to be, actually. All of the soft intelligence says that the key concern is the Black African, Black Caribbean population. There's no shortcut for getting out to people and talking to them, because people will have legitimate concerns. It's absolutely fine to have concerns. My approach and the approach of my teams and lots of other people is just to talk to people and address those concerns head on, which has worked pretty well thus far, and I think we'll continue down that path.
Yeah.
Thanks ever so much, Greg, as ever, for your report. Thanks, Greg.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just bring in one point? I think it's great we've got the £500. It's great we've got the support. My worry and concern is, and this is what I've had from some of my constituents, if their parents whose children who are at school, but they're asked to isolate because they're part of a bubble and they're sent home, and they work in a local supermarket or whatever, and someone has to stay home to look after them, and they were saying there wasn't much support for that. Could they apply? I'll find that out, but I think that's an area that you're not going to work because you've been tested. It's when somebody else might not even have it. It's the children at work. So we need to take that up as well. I don't know whether you know the answer to that, but I'll find it out another way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. And again, thank you, Greg.
Okay.
Thanks. Moving on. Items 8, items called in for scrutiny. Craig, are there any items being called in for scrutiny?
No, Chair, there are no new call-ins received, but I can report that the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee have submitted a report to Cabinet today outlining the outcome of their consideration of the budget reports, which they considered on 11th of Feb. The report has been circulated to members and has been published on the Council's website. Full details of the comments of the Scrutiny Committee are available in the report, and Cabinet are asked to note their comments, and in particular that they have recommended that the budget report be approved by Cabinet without amendment.
Thank you, Craig. Can members agree that, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on, item 9, retirement of staff. We have one member of staff who served over 20 years, actually 34 years, a head teacher, Diane Hetherington from Broomhall Nursery. Cabinet are asked to convey their council's thanks for work and extend their best wishes for future and a long and happy retirement. I'm sure that's something we can all join in doing. And a request for the appropriate extract of the Cabinet resolution under the common seal of council be forwarded to her. Is that agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed. Next item, item 10, Revenue, Budget and Capital Programme. Could I ask officers Ryan Keyworth and Dave Phillips to present, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'm Ryan Keyworth. I'm the Council's Director of Finance and Commercial Services. I'm going to take you briefly through the reports on the agenda today. This is the Council's revenue budget, and I'll come separately to the capital programme for the financial year 21-22, so next year starting 1st of April. Just by way of a little bit of background, the Council is legally required to set a balanced budget, and we are only permitted to borrow money to invest in assets or capital projects, as I'll come to in the capital programme. We did set a balanced budget for the current financial year for 2021, 12 months ago, but obviously the impact of the pandemic started almost as soon as that budget was approved. We do expect And I'll come on a little later on this agenda to talk about the month 9 budget monitoring for this financial year. We do expect to achieve a broadly balanced position for this financial year without needing to draw on reserves, which is a great result for the council, to be quite honest, in some particularly difficult circumstances. And that really builds on the careful financial management that this council's had for the last 10 years or more. Members will be aware that some local authorities are requiring government support this year to enable them to set a balanced budget, and I'm very pleased to report that Sheffield is not in that position. Sheffield's relative financial strength does mean that we're able to take a more strategic approach to dealing with challenges, and this has been a challenging budget to balance, but it does mean that we're not having to take the sort of emergency measures that some other councils are having to take. So the budget report does recommend a balanced budget for the council. That's not without savings. There are 15 million of portfolio savings and £6 million of corporate savings to be delivered. We're also using around £21 million of one-off government funding relating to the pandemic, most of which we expect to disappear after this financial year. Normally, what I'd like to see is a situation where we balance one-off funding with one-off expenditure, and we're nearly there. We've got around £17 million of one-off costs in this budget against that £21 million of one-off funding. So we're fairly closely balanced, and again, at this stage, given the position that this council's in, and all councils, in fact, that's not a bad place for us to be. The budget does include some fairly significant investments, and I'll just touch on those briefly. We've provided £12 million of additional funding for leisure and entertainment, essentially to ensure that the city's entertainment, sports and leisure facilities are able to reopen as they were before the pandemic struck. We're hoping that ongoing subsidy won't be needed beyond the next financial year, but we will obviously come back to members if that's the case. We're investing significantly in social care, both adults and children's. This budget sees expenditure increased by about 14% in those services on the previous year, and that makes an average of about 11% year on year for the last 4 years, about 88 million over that period. And that's on top of increases in previous years as well. And included in some of that is investments in youth services, working with our care providers to help them work towards foundation living wage accreditation, some investment in parks and leisure, across children's services, community safety, and improving standards in our private rented sector. And we're able to do that without using reserves to balance the budget for 21-22. What the council will be asked to, and what this budget recommends, is an increase in council tax of 2% for the core council tax and 3% for the adult social care precept. As part of that, we're developing measures to ensure that no one who is in receipt of council tax support pays that increase, and just over £500,000 has been included in the budget to fully fund that commitment. Just a word on council tax, actually. Around 3/4 of the increase in local government funding for the coming financial year is actually an ability for councils to increase council tax. That's analysis by the Institute of Fiscal Studies, not by us. And that essentially means that this council has been faced with a very difficult decision to raise council tax in order to balance those books. Looking a little further forward, there's obviously some significant one-off funding in this budget, but also the settlement that we've received from government is a one-year settlement, perhaps not surprising given the pandemic. And that means that at this stage, we've got no certainty as to really the short, medium or long-term funding prospects for local government. Central government have got some very difficult decisions to make about how they bring the public finances back into balance over the next few years. And we're hoping or expecting a spending review from government at some point during the middle of 2021. And we will need to consider very carefully with Cabinet and the administration how we respond to that as information becomes clear. Chair, I think that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction to the report. I'm obviously happy to take any questions that members have. Sorry, I would say I'll come on to the capital programme separately, if that's all right with you.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions? Paul, it looks like you, sorry, Terry, would you like to comment, please?
Thanks, Chair, and obviously I'll come in with the capital later, but certainly on the revenue, first of all, I think, it's a big thank you to officers and to staff to get us to this position. And later in the agenda, you'll see that on month 9 that we're still trying to squeeze every kind of penny left in the budget to make sure that we've got that balance going forward. And who could have forecast, Chair, in the last 12 months, probably the most challenging in Britain's recent peacetime history with the COVID and the cost of COVID on this council going through. But I think as Ryan kind of quite eloquently put, and really with the Scrutiny Board when we went to Scrutiny earlier in the month, that the government's failure to give us any kind of sustainable funding means that then has to fall back onto local taxation. And that really then falls onto our hardworking people of Sheffield to pick that up and to kind of push forward, which realistically is unsustainable again. So I make a call to government to look for sustainable funding and look that it gives our hardworking people and families a real opportunity to thrive in this. We also have to look, Chair, that through this revenue budget, as Ryan quite rightly said, that we have made as an administration a priority, and over the last 4 years has seen us give over 88 million to the adult and children's social care. And I really do feel that, that really puts our statements of intent that we're there to assist the most vulnerable in this city. And by doing so, that also underpins by the fact that anybody on council tax support, we are working tirelessly to get to a point where anybody on that support will not have to pick up the increase. And I just think I've got plenty more to say, Chair, and obviously at Budget Council when we push all this forward. But I'd just like to state that there is a sustainability theme running through all this budget, and even in this time of pandemic and case, we have actually seen that we've been able to steer this ship on a steady course. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Terry. Paul, you would like to come in?
Yes, I'd like to pass a comment. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers in the finance part of the council for what I believe is a fantastic job they've done with this year's budget, and also pass my thanks through to the leadership team who, after many years of reducing budgets in 2 key areas in my portfolio, we now are going to see the investment which will affect thousands of our residents, and that's in the community safety area and the private rented sector. And I think these are going to be welcomed across the city for the plans that we're going to bring forward for dealing with the issues in those 2 areas. I'd like to also thank the finance team for the support with the HRA budget. And I'm not going to reiterate what was said at the previous council meeting, but the amount of millions of pounds of investment going into residents of this city's housing under the current COVID situation, I think is truly remarkable. And I think you've done a fantastic job, and I really appreciate all the help you've given me in my portfolio. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Paul. Mark, if you would like to come in now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Ryan. The financial situation that we face is quite bleak and quite worrying. And I would like to touch on the 1-year settlement that government's brought forward with. Obviously, we are bringing forward the net zero carbon savings, and the cost to the city is part of that report. And we can see that there's multiple billions of pounds needed, and that's not something that we, the council, can deliver. And it's nothing that can be delivered with a 1-year settlement. As galling as it is to see the head of Microsoft saying that government needs to spend more money to settle climate change, and that the money spent on COVID is small change in comparison to what needs to be invested. He does have a point. I have to agree with him, even though I don't necessarily agree with his previous actions. So is there any movement from government to actually give us the securities and the assurances we need that funding will be there to tackle the climate crisis that we'll face. Is there any indication from Treasury that they will give us multi-year settlements going forward that means that we'll actually be able to budget and deliver the changes and reductions in carbon that we need? Thank you.
So just on that last point, thanks, Councillor Jones, for the question. We were expecting a multi-year settlement in the middle of 2021, and frankly, the pandemic got in the way of that. So I'm still very hopeful that we'll get a multi-year settlement, or at least decent indications of future settlements this year. In the meantime, the council continues to do what it can, and you'll note from the capital programme there's a significant thread of sustainability through that. And actually, on the capital approvals for this month, we're starting the vehicle replacement programme with £3.5 million of investment, essentially to bring the council's fleet up to scratch. So yeah, in the absence of a long, broad commitment from government, we continue to do what we can within our ability.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Ryan. Maz, if you want to ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just want to extend my appreciation and gratitude to the officers that work on this on a yearly basis. So the pressures on every year. Just to, I don't know if they're comments or questions, Chair. You know, in the budget report, page 49, the government is going to be given as 4.4 million less on business rates. That again demonstrates, you know, we as politicians, I know you as the leader with other core city leaders have been asking government to compensate us for the losses. I mean, in our portfolio, place portfolio, page 63, it mentions £20.1 million of pressures, and then page 72, unfortunately, we're having to lose 247 members of staff. So the government, in a sense, you know, it's a raw deal here. It said it would look after or put arm around businesses, individuals and local authorities, but it seems like, you know, we have got gaps in this budget, which pressures, it seems like, have been kicked down the road. The can's been kicked down the road for us to pick up. I welcome what Ryan has said about, you know, the struggle to balance this budget, but within there are still some challenges. And as Councillor Fox has highlighted, there's some really good investments that we've put in there from young people, social care and so forth. But the challenge does remain that the government inadequately hasn't funded what we need to balance this budget and ensure that services delivered for our citizens. With these pressures, not having that 4.4 million just compels us to try and find in-year savings. So I hope the Chancellor, when he makes his statement next month, understands and recognises the pressures that we've been put under. I mean, earlier when the Director of Public Health made his presentation, we've got another 10,000 people that'll be shielding, that'll be relying on this council to provide food, medicine and support with no additional resources. But again, tribute to our officers and politicians that have arrived at a balanced budget, but the challenge still remains that this Tory government doesn't recognise that it needs to fund councils properly so we can then support our citizens. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maz. Next question is from George.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo comments by others in our huge thanks for all the work that officers do, not just in drawing this budget, but actually running those crucial services day in, day out, and night and day. And thanks to Ryan for laying out the priority of investment in social care, because it's the right thing to do. And next month we will set out in more detail how we will continue to support the care sector and ensure that our COVID heroes working out in the city are rewarded. But we just need to be really, really clear today. To achieve what all of us here and everyone in the city knows that what people really deserve in terms of those who work and receive social care services, we need the government to step up in a way that they have completely failed to do so far. Just today, Angela Rayner is calling for the government to ensure that every care worker is paid £10 an hour. You don't need to be a budget expert to look at the budget of Sheffield City Council for social care. Despite the year-on-year increases, that there is simply not enough money in our budget to achieve that. We need the government to step in, not tomorrow, not next year, not in 2023 down the line, but now, to help councils achieve our ambitions to create sustainable care services with well-rewarded care workers. Next month, we will set out our own ambitions in that area and do everything we can, but it's absolutely clear to me and to all of us that the government has to step up the day to support councils and our ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you, George, and here. Next is Mary, if you'd like to ask your question, please.
Yeah, again, just thanks to Ryan, thanks to Eugene for this budget and what you've done, and also for the last 10 years, because we wouldn't be in this position now if the work hadn't gone in previous years, despite austerity and everything that has been thrown at us. And I know it's been a really, really difficult year, and we've made many demands on the finance team, not least our leisure centres, and we've kept them open when we could, when restrictions were lifted, and we will do again when restrictions are lifted. And I know it's been a headache for the finance team, but then, you know, that's what you're there for, to have a headache and deliver the finances for everybody across the council. And in my portfolio in particular, you know, there's been loads of extra expenditure in parks, as you know, to make them COVID safe. And, you know, I'm really proud of what your team has done and what our team has done and what all the portfolios across the council have done. So well done. And I'll just end there before your head gets too big, Ryan. But I'm sure you're very modest and you'll take that. Thank you.
Very kind, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Jackie, if you'd like to come in finally, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, obviously, I think it's a fantastic job that everybody's done, both the finance teams in the portfolio areas working with the central. It's been a real good example of partnership working and all those people out there. But just a sense of doom, I have to just come in and remind us all, yes, it's great we're setting a balanced budget, but we've had 10 years of austerity, 10 years of the demand on our services rising, actually. And on top of that, we've had this last year of this terrible pandemic, year and a few months really, where our services have more demand on them, and the needs and the demands are more complex than ever before. And we know, we've heard Greg earlier talking about where we are and thinking about getting to COVID zero. And yet we hear, don't we, that we will have more people unemployed when we come out of this, more people, you know, needing help on a domestic abuse, domestic violence, more people with mental health issues. And when I say people, I mean children, young people and adults across the board will need more money to spend. So I just hope, and the demand has been on our key services, not only on our COVID services, the extra on COVID. So I just think it's great and everybody's done a brilliant job, but I really, really do worry and I'm concerned that we still need to shout out for our city to government to say, whilst we're prudent, whilst we're managing our budget, which is all whilst we are a really, really well-run council, we need help too. We need help too. We need help for our the people of our city across the board. I'm glad to see that the consultation that we did, the people of Sheffield believe in investing in adult social care, in children's social care, in public health, in education, in our environment, and in the services that they're agreeing with what we're doing and the way we're doing it, but they're also saying we need more. So it's great. I'm sorry you have to put the council tanks up, but we need to make that have that money to get it. And I want to say thank you, but I really want to say you know, we're going to go through tough times, and I think it's great we're doing it, but I just think we just remember that these are very, very tough times. And sorry to be not Pollyanna-ish this time, not, you know, rosy tinted glasses, but, you know, doom and gloom, because I do think we've got a long way to go. And I hope we can get more money from the government, more money for our people who are trying to do the best they can through COVID and struggling. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And on behalf of all colleagues, I'd just like you to pass on to colleagues in finance our thanks for all your work in preparing this budget. It really has been much appreciated, particularly this year. And unfortunately, Ryan, I believe you're not off the hook yet, because item 11, revenue, budget and capital programme, it looks like that falls to you as well. So you're back in the hot seat now, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. So just on the capital programme, which is kind of part two of the main budget. Just a really quick canter through this. I'm conscious that as one of my colleagues said at the Scrutiny Board, after 200 or 300 pages of budget report, often the capital programme gets a short hearing. We've got a significant capital programme, and it's worth pointing out, best part of £200 million for next year. The capital programme is very much a moment in time, and it will change, and it does evolve, and we have reports every month at Cabinet that do that as new funding comes, new priorities emerge, and so on. We've got some core investment principles around making sure that we integrate with the Council's overall priorities, that we maximise external funding, that we take an affordable, sustainable and a prudent approach to our capital investment. So, you know, investing within the city's boundaries is a key part of our criteria. I will just say something very briefly on the variations in the programme that are reported in the capital report this year, and the distinction essentially between slippage and reprofiling. Slippage is an unplanned delay to a project, and we've got 3 examples of that this year. One is to the cremators project, which is a difficult project, listed buildings and a limited number of suppliers, so we want to take our time to get that one right. Works to Aldine House have been delayed due to COVID and the inevitable restrictions that imposes on us. And on Broadfield Road, we've had delays to that project, basically resulting from the need to do some compulsory purchase as part of it, and also some demolition works. Reflecting our careful and prudent approach to capital, we've reprofiled and moved, delayed some of the works on Heart of the City, essentially just making sure that we're absolutely certain before we go ahead with these major investments. And also some delays to the housing roofing programme, about £4 million of delay there, essentially pausing before we go out to tender to maximise the potential for solar panels to be included. And also on the Daresbury housing scheme, we encountered some very difficult, challenging ground conditions on the first survey. So again, it was the right thing to do to take a pause before we went ahead with that. I don't intend to go. There are 9 sections to the capital programme, which each have their own ways of developing proposals and coming forward. I'm not going to go through all of those, but what I will pick out is a few things. Housing growth. This is about delivering 3,000 new houses, mostly council housing stock across the city, and basically building those to the highest environmental standards that we're able to. Housing investment, which is about focusing on delivering warm, efficient homes for the council's housing tenants. We do continue to pursue the Heart of the City regeneration programme. And transport, these are schemes that promote active travel, road safety and air quality. So again, sustainability cutting right through the programme. COVID has obviously had an impact on delivery, but what we've done very consciously is worked with our supply chain, being really flexible with payment terms to help contractors cash flow where we've needed to, and essentially doing what we've been able to do, as much as we've been able to do, to keep the projects going and to keep the construction industry in the city moving as best we can through very difficult times. I've touched on sustainability a couple of times, about £140 million worth of investment in sustainability projects right across the programme. And we're obviously about to set up the Citizens Assembly, and we've already established a Green City Partnership Board. Every business case that we consider as part of the capital programme does consider sustainability and it understands how that project supports the drive towards net zero. We also have a well-established ethical procurement policy about prioritising local supply where we can, and up to £500,000 we go direct to Sheffield-based suppliers, which is the most we're allowed to do. We also make use of local frameworks where we can to try and keep spend as close to Sheffield if we can't direct it to be within. We've paid real living wage on construction projects for quite a number of years now, and we've signed up to a number of charters that support sustainability and workers' rights and that sort of thing. And we've also been promoting social value within our contracts for some time now, about the last 10 years, in fact. So things like apprentices, workshops, site visits, and working with our in-house teams to support people to develop as part of our own investment. Just to touch on the future, really, there is a green paper now on future procurement practices, which sounds terribly dry, but this follows on from Brexit and is essentially an opportunity for the British government to alter the procurement rules. Currently, British government rules essentially copy the former European procurement rules. So we will certainly be responding to that consultation process, and we'll be pushing for things like social value and an ability to keep more spend local wherever we can. And thanks, Chair. That's all I wanted to touch on the capital programme.
Thank you, Ryan, and thanks for your presentation. Terry, would you just like to come in quickly with a comment?
Just quickly, Chair, and Ryan's been quite eloquent there as he's kind of skipped over quite a few of our investments in this sustainability. But I would like to just add that obviously through all of this is our community wealth building and the way that we're going to kind of even more firm up that ethical procurement policy. And I think Ryan's quite right to highlight the big achievements through our apprentices and through local workforce and being able to get them kind of social values embedded into the way going forward with this administration, Chair. So just overall, I mean, those over £140 million over the next 5 years investment, and we'll see some of them in the next report, actually, like external wall insulation, 9-odd million, 20-odd million being into older people's livings to get people to still live independently, but to free up those family 2- and 3-bedroom homes just around the city and decarbonising buildings. Chair, it's a really exciting programme, but also we want to underpin that with that community wealth and that social value across the city via our organisations and administration's ethical procurement policy. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Terry. Councillor Jones, would you like to come in with a quick comment, please, finally, on this?
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to support and thank Terry for what he's just been saying there about the ethical procurement and the investment that we're bringing to sustainability within Sheffield, and repeat what Terry was saying in thanking Ryan and his team for trying to make sure that we can bring forward programmes as quickly as we can. You rightly highlighted that delays to replacing roofs have occurred, and that's regrettable, but where that is done so that we can look at how we can better increase the number of solar panel coverage on our properties, it is absolutely welcome. It's something we must do. There's little point us removing roofs and replacing them right now just to then have to do significant works on them for panels, and we know from what we need to do going forward, we're going to need to put solar panels on even my head if I don't move quick enough, because it's where we're going to need to be to make sure we're sustainable. So I really appreciate the work and the focus, and it's good to hear that when people say, oh, the council's not taking it seriously, that actually sustainability is at the core of every thought and every decision we're making. So really appreciate that, and wish you well in keeping this work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And again, thank you, Ryan. If you could take our thanks back to the team after this meeting, that'd be much appreciated. Well, thank you for your presentation. That moves us on to item 12, month 9 capital approvals. And is Phil Moorcroft available to make this presentation, please?
He's not, I'm afraid. I'm afraid you get me again. And
again, Ryan. Wow.
Sorry, Chair. If I can just bring us back to item 11. If I can just bring us back to item 11, Chair, on the month 9 budget monitoring. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
So item 11, month 9 budget monitoring. Very briefly, and Councillor Fox has already mentioned this. We're heading towards a balanced budget for 2020-21. We're now reporting at month 9 about £1.8 million over budget. The month 10 position, which I've seen in the last few days, is another step towards a balanced position. essentially because of additional government funding we've received, and that includes some fairly significant grants to leisure providers, Sheffield City Trust and others, that effectively reduces the council's costs. There are some underlying service overspends in around £6 million, mostly in adult social care and to a lesser extent in children. But what we've seen in recent months is that rate of increase slow, which is a positive for the future. We don't yet know the impact of the financial impact anyway of hospital discharges from the recent peak in coronavirus, and that will become clearer towards the year end. So it's one very much to keep a close eye on. Just on the other budgets, dedicated schools grant slightly over, but nothing to give us a cause for concern. Public health more or less balanced, and the housing revenue account, which was the subject of a significant report last month. Again, rental income lower because of the pandemic, which does affect the capital programme, but that's been incorporated into the HRA business plan. There's a few recommendations around the collection fund, the programme, and PEC 2020. But I think that's all I really wanted to say on the revenue monitoring, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Item 12 then, again, capital.
Yes,
do you want to move on to that?
Again, very briefly, thank you. So this is the normal monthly capital approvals process. I said that the capital programme evolves month on month, and this is one of those evolutions. We've got 6 additions to specific projects, which create about £6.5 million of additional investment. Just to pick a couple of highlights, really. SEND school places, a total of £2.7 million for places in Gleadless and Talbot. Hopefully, we expect that to be funded by DFE. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, about £3.5 million as part of a £21 million programme to significantly upgrade the council's 1,100 vehicle fleet, to reduce the age of those vehicles from an average of about 8 years to 3 to 4 years, which will make a massive improvement in the environmental performance of those vehicles. And in the first 2 years, actually, we're going to be replacing about 350 of the oldest vehicles, which we're still running some vehicles which have a Euro 3 engine, which is clearly way lower than the sort of standards we need today. And that's a good example of the council using its own borrowing ability to do that. So most of that programme in those early years is funded by borrowing. I think that's all I really wanted to pull out, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. I see no more questions there. That brings us on to item 13, which is proposed changes towards a sustainable Streets Ahead contract. The presenting officer to be Gillian Charters. Gillian, if you'd like to.
Hello, Chair. Just to introduce myself, I'm Gillian Charters, and here today presenting the proposed savings and changes to the Streets Ahead contract with Amy. I'm the interim head of highway maintenance for the council. So as outlined in the report, we've been negotiating with Amy for a number of months now to provide a stable and sustainable environment for the delivery of the contract, and to get the benefit of a saving back to the council from that. So the negotiation we have been working on ensures that there's no changes to the outputs provided through the contract by the contractors. There's no changes to the service standards that our customers will see on the ground in Sheffield. There are a small number of tweaks that we are making to the performance requirements. As outlined in Appendix A, we've got a track changes version there so people can clearly see that the tweaks we're making. They largely relate to the delivery or the measurement aspect, so that they're not really related to the overall outcome. They are there to improve the interpretation between the parties. But there is a track changes version so everybody can see those proposals. In terms of the proposed changes to the payment and performance mechanism, there are a number of proposals here. We have a ratchet mechanism that escalates the deductions in relation to a performance issue when the same issue occurs on a number of occasions in a given month. We are proposing to reduce that. It's still there in effect, but we are proposing to lower that. And we're also proposing that we do not apply that to the customer service and the information standards of the contract. So that's not the frontline delivery, but that's very much about the contractual mechanisms between ourselves and Amy. We are seeking to introduce a monthly performance cap, so that will provide a maximum liability for AMI in a given month in terms of their performance deductions. But as a safeguard for the council, we have negotiated an escalation process whereby if the cap is consistently exceeded, it will increase. So there is a built-in mechanism to incentivise AMI to drive their performance back within the parameters of good performance to the authority. Recognising, you know, the really big importance that winter maintenance is to the council, and just for clarity, winter maintenance within the realms of the contract is what we know as scheduled gritting and providing grit bins. And as this year has also included providing grit cover to vaccination centres. The cap mechanism does increase for 6 months of the year when we are in the winter maintenance period, so that's from October to March. So there's a built-in escalation of the cap relating to winter maintenance specifically for those functions. Highway emergencies are also exempt from the cap process, so that is when AMI are responding to emergencies on the road network, clearing up after accidents, or any of our structures, bridges being compromised out on the network at any time. So they will not be part of the cap mechanism. In terms of termination, we will be kind of running a two-track system here. So the original parameters that go towards calculating terminating the contract will prevail. So the original performance mechanism is still live for that element. So if we are in the realms of really poor performance, our exposure hasn't been changed in any way to needing to exit the contract through that termination clause. And in relation to this, we've secured a £1.7 million saving to the council on a year-on-year basis going forward for the entirety of the contract. That kind of captures my outline for the report, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gillian. I just have one question from Councillor Mark Jones. Mark, if you or a comment, if you'd like to make your comment or question, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation and all the hard work you've put in on this, Jill. I know that this last year has been particularly challenging with the COVID backdrop. We've had lots of service changes to deal with, and whilst dealing with that complex, ever-changing backdrop, you've also managed to unpick the contract and make it better for the city, making sure that we don't get any reductions in services, whilst meaning that we'll be able to direct money not towards our road maintenance, but to looking after the people of this city directly. So I know a lot of work has gone into this, and I know that you spent many hours, and at some stage I'm hoping you'll be able to catch up on some of that sleep that you've missed out on, and the other officers that have supported you. So I'd really like to go on record to express my gratitude for all the hard work and effort that's gone in. It's very much appreciated, Jill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. And before I go back to those previous other items, I've suddenly realised that we didn't take a vote on recommendations for approval. So before we go back there, could I just ask whether item 13 and this Sustainable Streets Ahead contract item is approved?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. So could we just go back to item 10? And is that approved?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Item 11, capital budget programme, is that agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. And month 9, capital approvals, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
I can only apologise, it's been a novice in the chair. So moving on to item 14 swiftly, which is New Museums Trust for Sheffield. And Rebecca, if you'd like to present, please.
Mute, Rebecca.
Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Maddox. I work within Culture and Environment, supporting culture. This report is to seek approval from Cabinet for Sheffield Industrial Museums Trust and Museums Sheffield to come together as one united Sheffield Museums Trust from April 2021. Now, although both those organisations are independent trusts, the City Council has quite significant interests in this situation because the City Council owns the buildings which the museums operate from. You own the collections which they display. We're a major funder and also Cabinet are trustees of the Western Park charity. So this is a really good news story. This is a situation where the City Council will be getting an even better outcome from the investment that you make into the museums. It's a process that's been going on for developing over several years. And although it's very much not a response to COVID, it makes even more sense to have a single and more resilient organisation in the context of COVID and all the challenges of the past year. As it notes in the report, both trusts have actually made an amazing job of weathering this storm and using all the support mechanisms available to them. So a new United Trust will be better for staff who'll have more development opportunities. It'll be better for Sheffield residents who'll have a more coherent and more joined up museum service that can tell the diverse stories of the city. And it'll be better for visitors, as the museums are a vital part of Sheffield's visitor economy. We'll actually end up with one of the largest museum groups in the country. And we do have exhibits of national importance, including the River Don engine at Kelham and the National Metalwork Collection at Millennium Gallery. So I recommend the report to you and do ask me any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. Could I bring in Councillor Mary Lee first, please, with a comment?
Yeah, just first of all, I just wanted to say how well both trusts have managed their museum over the last 10 years during a period of austerity. Let's not forget that, you know, whilst the council has lost half its funding, these museums have also had to see a funding reduction over the years, and they've managed their facilities really, really well. So I congratulate them for that one. As Rebecca said, you know, merging these two museums, which hold, you know, such a large amount of the heritage of Sheffield, particularly the industrial heritage, you know, that we're all so proud of. But we'll make them more resilient, make them more stable, and give them a wider range of opportunities going forward over the next number of years. So congratulations for all the work they've done, and Rebecca as well, because I know she's been involved in carrying out the discussions and the negotiations to bring the merger about. And I particularly want to thank Kim Streets and chairs of both the trusts, because not only have they negotiated this, but some of them will be standing down. And I want to thank them for all the work, all the trustees and the chairs that they've done over the last number of years, however long they've been there. And some of them have put in a lot of work for the city over many, many years. And of course, all the trustees as well. And I think the staff and ourselves and the new governance model will take us into the future. And I think it's going to be optimistic and very bright. And they bring such a lot to our city. So I'm really proud of them and what they're doing and what they're going to do.
Thank you, Mary. Chair. Thank you, Mary. Jackie, you've got a comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just to say, echo everything that Mary said, really. You know, Sheffield is a great city, a city of heritage and innovation. And I think our museums and galleries show exactly that story of Sheffield, and the story of Sheffield as it grows and it adapts. It's creative, and we know the creative industries, and that this is part of that. So I just wanted to say, I think this is a great move for both of the trusts. The trusts have gone on, independently, and they've done some wonderful stuff, as has been said, but to bring it together and to be able to work together and see the connection between the paintings and the industrial machines, that are at Abbeydale and that are at Kelham. I just think it's so exciting. It's an exciting time going forward. And despite the pandemic, I want to echo everything that's been said about the chief execs of both of the trusts and the chairs of the trustees and the trustees. Some of these people have been working so hard and to keep it going, and our officers in the council and the council for carrying on supporting it. We have statutory duties for children's social care and for adult social care and for a variety of things. But the council and this administration, to keep the support they've had to the culture, to the arts, is vital, I think, because we want a city where, you know, we have across the board, not just bread, but roses too. So thank you very much to everybody involved.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Rebecca. There are recommendations within that report that are seeking approval. Could members approve, please?
Yes.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on, item 15, lease of land at Hillsborough Park to Sheffield, to Disability Sheffield. Presenting officers are Ian Wrightson and Ruth Bell. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Chair. If I can start, my name is Ruth Bell. I'm Head of Parks and Countryside, and Ian and myself are presenting this on behalf of Tammy, who's actually Tammy Whittaker, who's on leave this week. If it's okay, I'm just going to pull out a few key points from the report rather than go through it line by line. The report is about leasing land within Hillsborough Park to Disability Sheffield. Sheffield Cycling for All is a project that is run by Disability Sheffield in Hillsborough Park. It's been there for around about 10 years. The operation is currently run from 2 steel containers which are located next to the former coach house. They need to be relocated by the end of February this year, 2021, to allow the redevelopment of the coach house site. An alternative location within the park has been identified. It's at the northeastern edge of the park, and a map showing the location is in the report for you to see. Hillsborough Park is a charitable site, and this proposed lease, we feel, contributes to the objectives of the charity. It also aligns with the objectives of the council's Better Parks initiative. And further to that, Hillsborough Park is also included in a project which is around active parks, and Disability Sheffield's proposals make a significant contribution to Hillsborough Park's role as an active city. It's felt that the proposal will have a positive impact on Hillsborough Park's disabled users and also the members of Cycling for All. We therefore ask that Cabinet, acting as charity trustees of Hillsborough Park, grant the lease to Disability Sheffield. There are a number of recommendations within the report that go into some detail. I'd be happy to take any questions, and as I said, my colleague Ian Wrightson from Property is here if you've got any specific questions that he might be able to help with.
Thank you, Ruth. Mary, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, I want to thank officers, because I know this has been done quite speedily because of the nature, because we've had Cycling for All. I've had to move very quickly because of the developments at the coach house, which again are pretty wonderful developments up there. And I know everybody's worked hard to make this happen and bring it to Cabinet today. They have been there a long time. They do a fantastic job. Not just, you know, for the health and well-being of the people that are involved, but their enjoyment as well, because sometimes we talk about health and well-being and we talk about all the serious stuff, but let's not forget, you know, the company and the enjoyment people get and the pleasure, which keeps us all going as well. And that's particularly over this past 12 months. Hillsborough Park's it's a destination park, and it's an active park, which means that we'll be putting more, hopefully more sporting facilities in there for people to come and enjoy. And you will, you know, have a wide range of visitors, and we'll have CAFs, and it's part of the Better Parks projects as well. Some of those, the facilities that will go into there. And lastly, I just want to thank all the local councillors that have been involved in this and the support they've given, particularly for this project to move forward very quickly, because they've had to move. So again, thanks to officers, councillors, and all Cycling for All as well, and all they do for the people of Sheffield.
Thank you, Mary. And I'd just like to add my personal thanks, Ruth, to staff and to the group for working so quickly to bring this to a conclusion. The report does contain a recommendation for approval, but in doing so, I'd just like to remind Cabinet that we're acting as charity trustees rather than Cabinet members. So there is a recommendation for approval in there. Do members approve?
Approved.
Agreed.
Approved.
Thank you.
Chair.
Moving on to the next item, item 16 is lease renewal on Forge Dam Cafe, Fulwood. And I'm guessing that's going to be Ruth and Ian again.
It is, thank you, Chair. So this report is about a lease for Forge Dam Cafe in Forge Dam Park. The property that's referred to comprises of a cafe, kitchen, stores and some ancillary space. It's previously been let on a 21-year lease that was assigned to Nicholas Dunn in 2012, and he's operated the cafe since then. this refers to a new 25-year lease to Mr. Dunn, and terms for that lease have been agreed. It provides a continued provision of a cafe within the park, which similar to the previous item, it aligns with the objectives of the council's Better Parks initiative. We believe the proposal contributes to the objectives of the charity for the Forge Dam site. It also does not change the existing provision within the park, but maintains the existing operator. So we'd therefore ask that Cabinet, again, acting as charity trustees, declare that the Forge Dam Cafe is, this is quite formal wording, apologies, declare that the Forge Dam Cafe is surplus to requirements for the charity, and also grant a new lease of the property to the current tenant Nicholas Dunn for a period of 25 years on the terms that have been set out in the report. There are further recommendations within the report, more detail to be found there, and again, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Ruth. Mary, did you want to come in on this item?
No, just another thanks to Ruth and her team for moving this forward with the Better Parks proposals, which is about bringing an income into the parks. You know, our income has gone down over the last 10 years. So this development, Better Parks development and policy is helping to bring an income in. And I think we'll see more of these projects over the next year because they now coming to fruition. Despite COVID, we've still carried on working on all the proposals and business cases that have come in. And as you know, last month we had the Friends of Portobello here, congratulated them on the fundraisers that they've done and the work that we're going to be starting up there at Portobello. So this is just an added enhancement, and we should all get out and visit the CAF when we get a chance, when restrictions have been removed again. So congratulations, everybody. It's good news.
Thank you, Mary. I have two other questioners. Jackie, if you would like to ask your question, please. But in doing so, can you ensure that you're not referring to appendices 1 or 2 whilst asking your question, please?
No, thank you very much for the report. I just realised that I am a JG Graves trustee. I don't need to declare an interest. It's not pecuniary, but do I in this? I just thought I'd ask the question. As JG Graves gave the land to the council.
Thank you. Gillian, could you confirm, please?
Yeah. Is it a paid position, Jackie? No, but then it's personal interest only.
Thank you.
So you can carry on and you can comment and you can vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for clearing that up, Gillian, and thanks for asking, Jackie. Maz, you've got a quick comment that you'd like to make, please?
Yeah, just want to thank the officers and Mary supporting small businesses, Chair. Great to see this small business. I picked it up on Twitter earlier this week. I think it was Andy Kershaw. Bit of history about the gentleman who lives next door to his business, and extending it for 25 years gives that a surety that the business needs, and supports them park users, as Mary said. Hopefully, when the restrictions open, we can go outdoors and enjoy a nice drink or food, or just a visit to the park. So fantastic news, and it's great to see small businesses being supported by the council.
Thanks, Maz. And again, this report comes with a recommendation for approval, but in doing so, can members just bear in mind that you're acting as charity trustees, as Ruth pointed out in that presentation. Do we agree this report?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Love the drawings, Ruth, at the back. Peter's drawings there look amazing.
They are, thanks.
Thanks very much. And it looks like Ruth and Ian aren't quite off the hot seat yet. Item 17, lease of the former bowling green at High Hazels Park to the Yorkshire Dog Trading. Ruth, if you just want to briefly touch on that one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Last but not least, this report is regarding a lease of land in High Hazels Park to Yorkshire Dog Training. So just very quickly, Yorkshire Dog Training has been trading for around about 10 years, operating in Leeds, Doncaster and Wakefield, and they wish to open a site in Sheffield. The disused former bowling green in High Hazels Park has been identified as the preferred location for this activity. Again, High Hazels is a charitable site, and we believe that the proposed lease contributes to the objectives of the charity. It also aligns with the objectives of the Council's Better Parks initiative. And similar to the first item that I talked about, High Hazels Park is also included in the project around active parks, and the Yorkshire Dog Training proposal makes a significant contribution to High Hazels' role as an active city park. So we're therefore asking that Cabinet, acting again as charity trustees, agrees to grant a lease of property to Yorkshire Dog Training. There are further recommendations within the report, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ruth. Mary, I can see you'd like to make a comment, please.
Yeah, once again, just thanks again to officers for this. It is a redundant bowling green up at High Hazels, and it's in a corner, it's in my ward, so I've got an interest as well, and it's in a corner of the park which is right at the top end and not used by many people apart from bowlers. So to have people up there, and again a small business being active and drawing in more people, you know, to make, you know, if we've got people around it, it makes our parks much more safer, and I think this will help in that, in doing that. So again, thanks for that. I think I was going to make another comment, I can't remember what it is, but yeah, again, it bringing some income into the park. So and I know that the parks, Friends of the Parks at High Hazels have been involved in the consultation. They've been around for 20 odd years, and a small group of people do a great, fantastic job, and also the bowling club has also been involved, and they're very happy with it as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Again, this report comes with recommendation for approval, but in doing so, we're acting as charity trustees rather than Cabinet members. Is everybody agreed to accept those proposals?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you. And thanks for bringing your reports, Ruth, Andy, and thank you very much. Now moving on to item 18, City of Sheffield, 104 Mill Road, compulsory purchase order 2021, and Neil Dunk to present, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and everybody else. My name is Neil Dunk. I'm Legal and Policy Officer in Private Housing Standards, and my job is to deal with problematic long-term empty properties right across the city. The purpose of the report is to seek authority to make a compulsory purchase order in respect of 104 Mill Road at Ecclesfield. I'd like to give a very brief summary just to complement the full report that you'll already have seen. This mid-terrace property in Ecclesfield is believed to have been empty since at least April 1999. It has remained in a state of serious disrepair internally and externally. Complaints have been received from neighbours concerned about the condition of the property and the negative effect it was creating. Notices have been served on the owner under the Building Act and under the Housing Act due to the presence of numerous serious hazards. The property is unregistered and council records indicate that the owner is deceased. We identified and contacted third parties connected with the owner, but efforts to work with these contacts were unsuccessful. There's a demand for such properties in this area, particularly from working professionals, couples, first-time buyers, families, single adults, and investors. The fact that no one has taken responsibility for this property leads us to believe that without this intervention in the form of compulsory purchase, the property will remain in this condition, causing further nuisance to neighbours and to the wider community. I'd like to invite any questions.
Thank you, Neil. I don't see anybody indicating to ask any questions. So on that basis, the report contains a recommendation for approval. Do members approve?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks for that. Item 19 is again the City of Sheffield, 1 Havelock Street, compulsory purchase order number 2021. And if Neil, if you'd just like to briefly present that report, please. Thank you.
Yes, once again, the purpose of this report is to seek authority to make a compulsory purchase in respect of 1 Havelock Street. This end terrace property in Broom Hall has been empty since 2005. It has remained in a very poor state of repair internally and externally. A total of 7 complaints have been received from neighbours relating to its condition and to antisocial behaviour, including drug abuse and vandalism. Notices have been served on the owner, including an improvement notice under the Housing Act due to the presence of numerous serious hazards, and an abatement notice under the Environmental Protection Act due to the presence of vermin, infestation and drug paraphernalia. The council has written to the owner on many occasions, including offers to purchase the property by agreement. The owner has not responded to these offers. The owner has made no efforts to refurbish the property. Windows are smashed and boarded. The property has rising and penetrating damp and has floors with floorboards removed. There's a demand for such properties in this area of the city, which is situated close to Hallamshire Hospital and to Sheffield University. The fact that the owner has failed to carry out any refurbishment of this property and has refused offers by the council to sell to them leads us to believe that without this intervention in the form of compulsory purchase, the property will remain in this condition, causing further nuisance to neighbours and to the wider community.
Thank you, Neil. I don't see anybody indicating wanting to ask questions. Again, this comes with a recommendation for a report contains a recommendation for approval. Can members approve that? Agree to approve that?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Apologies. I believe that about winds up our business for today, and all that's left is the date and time of next meeting. Craig, could you confirm when that is, please?
I can, Chair. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, 17th of March at 2 p.m.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank everybody for their attendance today and for their contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thanks,
Bye.
Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.